My life had always revolved around my family. Since I was young, I was the one everyone relied on. The problem solver, the mediator, the emotional anchor holding everything together. My younger sister Clara, with her radiant smile and carefree nature, was always the darling of the family. My older brother Victor, on the other hand, was reserved, his cool demeanor often masking his calculating tendencies. Despite it all, I loved them fiercely. To me, family was everything, loyalty above all, even when it came at my own expense. But that belief shattered one crisp autumn morning, just weeks before my wedding to Killian. Killian, kind-hearted, dependable, with his auburn hair and piercing gray eyes, was my rock. He wasn't just my fiancé. He was my safe haven in a world filled with uncertainty. Together we had built a future I was eager to embrace. That morning, I decided to surprise my mother with photos from my latest wedding dress fitting. I let myself into the family estate, still feeling like I belonged there. But as I approached the living room, the sound of raised voices made me stop in my tracks. "She doesn't deserve any of this," Clara spat, venom dripping from her voice. "Killian, the inheritance, all the attention, it should have been mine. Amelia's had everything handed to her on a silver platter." My heart sank. Clara's words echoed in my mind, sharp and unforgiving. Then Victor's voice cut in, cold and calculated. "Calm down, Claire. By the time we're done, she won't have a dime left to her name. I've already convinced Father to rewrite the will in our favor. As for Killian, let's just say I've planted enough doubts in his mind to make him reconsider the wedding." My legs felt like they might give out beneath me. I clutched the doorframe for support, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. My own family, my brother, my sister, were conspiring against me. And then, as if to twist the knife, my mother's voice joined in. "Amelia's too naive for her own good. It's better this way. She needs to learn life isn't a fairy tale." I couldn't listen anymore. My chest tightened as I stumbled out of the house, their words replaying in my mind like a cruel refrain. How could the people I loved most betray me like this? How long had they been plotting against me? The questions swirled in my head as I drove aimlessly through the city, my tears blurring the roads ahead. Hours later, I arrived back at my apartment, completely drained. Killian was waiting for me, concern etched into every line of his face. "Amelia, where have you been? I've been calling you all day," he said, his voice full of worry. But I couldn't answer. I collapsed into his arms, the weight of everything I'd heard crushing me. "They betrayed me," I whispered, my voice breaking. "My own family, they betrayed me." Killian held me tightly, his arms the only thing keeping me from falling apart completely. "I'm here," he said softly. "We'll figure this out together." His words were like a lifeline, but the pain of betrayal lingered, raw and unbearable. That night, as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, a quiet resolve began to form within me. I wouldn't let their greed destroy me. They thought I was weak, easy to manipulate, but they were wrong. I would rise above this. Not for them, not out of spite, but for myself. I would prove to myself that I was stronger than their betrayal. When I woke up the next morning, it felt as if the world had lost its color. My family's betrayal clung to me like a suffocating shadow, making it hard to breathe, let alone function. Every word they had spoken replayed in my head like a broken record, each one slicing deeper than the last. I didn't know how to face the day, let alone the people around me. The thought of pretending everything was fine felt impossible. I called in sick to work, something I rarely did. As I sat in my tiny kitchen, staring at a cup of tea that had long gone cold, I realized I had no idea what to do next. My family had been my foundation, the people I always turned to, even in my darkest moments. Now they were the ones who had ripped my world apart. How do you pick up the pieces when the ones you trusted most are the ones who broke you? Killian was my only anchor. He stayed by my side, giving me space when I needed it, but always reminding me I wasn't alone. "You're stronger than this," he told me one evening as we sat on the couch. His gray eyes held a quiet determination, as though he believed in me more than I believed in myself. "They may have tried to tear you down, but they don't define you, Amelia. You define you." His words resonated, but they didn't make the pain go away. Each time I thought about my sister's jealous words or my brother's cold calculations, my chest tightened with anger and grief. My mother's betrayal hurt the most. I had always idolized her, striving to be the daughter she could be proud of. To hear her dismiss me so casually, as if I were just a naive child in need of a harsh lesson, shattered something deep inside me. For weeks, I avoided any contact with them. My phone buzzed with messages from Clara and Victor, all laced with false concern. Can we talk? Clara wrote. I think you're misunderstanding things. Victor was even colder, texting only, it's not what you think. Let's discuss this like adults. I deleted their messages without replying. There was nothing to say to people who had conspired to ruin my life. My mother didn't reach out at all. That silence hurt more than their empty words ever could. It was as if she didn't care, as if I had already ceased to exist in her world. The weight of that realization pressed down on me, threatening to pull me under. But every time I felt myself sinking, Killian was there to remind me I wasn't alone. One evening he came home with a small notebook in his hands. Here, he said, placing it gently in front of me. Write it down. All of it. The anger, the pain, the confusion, whatever you're feeling. You don't have to share it with anyone, but you need to let it out. At first I balked at the idea. Writing felt pointless, like shouting into a void. But one sleepless night, when the memories of their betrayal were too loud to ignore, I opened the notebook. The words spilled out of me in a torrent, raw, messy, and unfiltered. I wrote about Clara's jealousy, Victor's manipulation, and my mother's cold indifference. I wrote about the way their betrayal had made me question everything about myself, from my worth to my ability to trust. As the days turned into weeks, the notebook became my refuge. Each time I filled a page, I felt a little lighter, as if I were slowly untangling the knots they had tied in my heart. Killian never asked to read it, respecting the privacy I needed to process my pain. Instead, he supported me in quiet, thoughtful ways, bringing me tea when I stayed up late writing, holding me when the tears came without warning, and reminding me every day that I was more than their betrayal. Eventually, I began to realize something important. Their actions said more about them than they did about me. Clara's jealousy, Victor's greed, and my mother's indifference were their flaws, not mine. I had spent so long trying to understand why they had done what they did, but maybe there was no reason that could make sense of it. Maybe the only thing I could control was how I responded. With that realization came a small, flickering sense of hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make me want to try, to take the first steps toward reclaiming my life. I started small, focusing on the things I could control. I cleaned my apartment, which had become a chaotic mess in the aftermath of their betrayal. I cooked meals instead of relying on takeout, finding comfort in the simple act of nourishing myself. I even went for a walk in the park, breathing in the crisp autumn air and letting the golden leaves remind me that change could be beautiful. But healing wasn't linear. There were still nights when the memories overwhelmed me, when I cried myself to sleep wondering if I would ever feel whole again. There were days when a random song or a passing stranger's laugh would bring it all rushing back, leaving me raw and aching. And through it all, Killian was there, his quiet strength a constant reminder that I wasn't as alone as I felt. One day, as I sat by the window watching the city bustle below, I realized something else. I didn't want to stay in this limbo forever. I didn't want to be defined by their betrayal or by the pain they had caused. I wanted to be more, stronger, wiser, and better for having survived it. And so, I made a decision. I didn't know exactly how I would move forward, but I knew I had to try. I picked up the notebook Killian had given me and turned to a blank page. At the top, I wrote 3 words. A new beginning. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. Waking up the next morning, I felt a faint sense of hope, like the first glimmer of dawn after a long, stormy night. It wasn't as if the pain of betrayal had vanished overnight. I knew it wouldn't. But for the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of determination, a tiny ember reminding me that I could still reclaim my life. The question was where to start. For so long, my family's opinions had been the foundation of my self-worth. Clara's praise made me feel like I was enough. Victor's approval felt like validation. But their betrayal had torn that foundation apart, leaving me questioning everything about myself. Who was I if I wasn't the dependable daughter or the selfless sister? Could I trust my own instincts, knowing I had trusted people who had turned on me so completely? I started small, focusing on rebuilding trust in myself. It wasn't easy. Every decision felt like a minefield, every step like walking on glass. Even mundane choices like what to cook for dinner or whether to call a friend filled me with hesitation. What if I chose wrong? What if I failed? The doubts were relentless, but I refused to let them paralyze me. Killian was my steadying force, though he never tried to take over or make decisions for me. Instead, he gave me space to rediscover my strength. You don't have to have it all figured out today, he told me one evening as we sat on the couch, the soft glow of the lamp casting warm shadows on the walls. Take it one step at a time. Trust yourself, you're stronger than you think. Those words stayed with me, echoing in my mind as I started to take those small steps. I returned to work, determined to prove to myself that I could still excel despite everything. At first, it felt impossible to focus, my thoughts constantly drifting back to the betrayal. But as I immersed myself in my projects, I began to remember the things I loved about my job. The creative challenges, the sense of accomplishment, the camaraderie with my coworkers. Slowly but surely, I felt my confidence begin to rebuild. I also started reconnecting with old friends, people I had unintentionally distanced myself from over the years. One evening, I invited my best friend from college, Elise, over for dinner. She had always been my rock during our university days, but life had pulled us in different directions. As we sat at my small kitchen table, sharing a bottle of wine and laughing about old memories, I felt a warmth I hadn't realized I'd been missing. You've always been so strong, Elise said, her eyes shining with sincerity. Even back then you had this way of picking yourself up no matter what. I know you'll get through this. Her words hit me harder than I expected. For so long I had seen myself as weak, as someone who had been broken by betrayal. But hearing Elise's perspective made me wonder if maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as broken as I thought. Maybe the strength she saw in me was still there, waiting to be rediscovered. One of the hardest parts of rebuilding trust in myself was confronting the voices of doubt that lingered in my mind. Voices that sounded eerily like my family's. Clara's jealous remarks about me being spoiled, Victor's cold dismissal of my worth, my mother's scornful tone when she called me naive. They all played on a loop, undermining every small victory I achieved. But with each passing day their voices grew quieter, replaced by my own. I began writing in my notebook again, but this time, it wasn't just about venting my anger or sadness. I wrote affirmations, small reminders of the things I had accomplished and the person I wanted to become. I am strong, I wrote one morning after nailing a presentation at work. I am worthy, I scribbled after reconnecting with Elise. The more I wrote, the more I began to believe those words. Killian noticed the change in me before I even did. One evening, as we sat on the balcony watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, he turned to me with a soft smile. You seem lighter, he said, his voice warm. Like you're starting to find yourself again. I looked at him surprised. Do you really think so? I asked, my voice tinged with uncertainty. He nodded. I don't just think so, I know so. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Emilia. And it's amazing to watch you grow into that strength. His words brought tears to my eyes, but for the first time in a long time, they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude, of hope, of pride in the progress I had made. I still had a long way to go, but I was starting to trust myself again, piece by piece. As the weeks turned into months, I began to see the world, and myself, through a new lens. I started saying no to things that didn't serve me, setting boundaries that I had always been too afraid to enforce. I stopped seeking validation from others and began finding it within myself. And with each step I felt a little more whole, a little more like the person I was always meant to be. Looking back, I realized that rebuilding trust in myself wasn't just about moving past the betrayal. It was about reclaiming my identity, my voice, and my power. My family's actions had tried to break me, but they had only revealed the strength I hadn't known I possessed. And as I stood on the balcony that evening watching the world continue to turn, I knew I was ready for whatever came next. As much as I tried to focus on rebuilding my life, the shadow of my family's betrayal lingered like an unresolved chord. I had avoided them for months, deleting their messages and declining their calls, but I knew that running from them forever wasn't an option. If I was going to truly move on, I needed to face them, to confront their actions and make it clear that I wouldn't allow their betrayal to define me. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. One evening, I received an invitation from my father to attend a family dinner. It was an elaborate attempt to pretend everything was normal, a thinly veiled ploy to reconcile on their terms. My first instinct was to toss the invitation in the trash, but Killian stopped me. You've been working so hard to take back control of your life, he said gently. Maybe this is your chance to show them they don't have power over you anymore. He was right, as he so often was. Avoiding them had given me temporary peace, but it hadn't given me closure. If I was going to fully heal, I needed to confront them, Not with anger but with the strength and confidence I had been building within myself. On the day of the dinner, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the neckline of my dress. It was a deep emerald green, a color that Killian said brought out my eyes. "You look incredible," he said from the doorway, his gray eyes full of admiration. "They won't know what hit them." His support gave me the courage to face what lay ahead. As I stepped into the family estate, memories of happier times flooded my mind. Holidays spent laughing in the grand living room, late-night talks with Clara in the kitchen, my father's proud smile when I graduated. But those memories felt distant now, like they belonged to someone else. The house felt colder, emptier, despite its grandeur. The family was already gathered in the dining room when I arrived. Clara was the first to notice me, her face lighting up with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You came," she said, rushing over to hug me. Her embrace felt hollow, like an act she had rehearsed. Victor stood by the fireplace, his expression unreadable, while my mother sat at the head of the table, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Amelia," my father said, his voice warm but tinged with uncertainty. "It's good to see you. We've missed you." I took a deep breath, steadying myself before speaking. "I'm here because I want answers," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I've given you months to come clean, to tell me the truth. And yet you've said nothing. So let's not pretend this is a happy reunion. You know why I'm here." My words hung in the air like a challenge, and for a moment no one spoke. Then Clara broke the silence, her voice tinged with defensiveness. "Amelia, you've misunderstood everything. We never meant to hurt you. We were just trying to protect me." I cut her off, my green eyes locking onto hers. "Is that what you're going to say?" "As I heard everything, Clara. I heard you say I didn't deserve what I had. I heard you and Victor plotting to take away my inheritance. I even heard Mother calling me naive. So please, don't insult me by pretending this was for my benefit." Clara flinched, her facade cracking. "I was jealous, okay?" she admitted, her voice trembling. "You always had everything. The attention, the opportunities, Killian. I wanted a chance to shine." Her words stung, but they also revealed the depth of her insecurity. For a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Victor, ever the calculated one, stepped forward, his expression cold and composed. "You've made your point, Amelia," he said. "But you can't change what's already been done. Father's made his decision about the will, and you'll have to accept it." I turned to my father, my heart pounding. "Is that true?" I asked. "Did you really rewrite the will to cut me out?" My father's face darkened, guilt flickering in his eyes. "Amelia, it's more complicated than that," he began, but I didn't let him finish. "No, it's not," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "You made a choice to betray your own daughter. And that's something I will never forget." My mother finally spoke, her tone sharp. "Enough of this, Amelia. You've always been too emotional, too idealistic. Life isn't fair and you need to grow up and accept that." Her words, meant to wound, only strengthened my resolve. "You're right about one thing, Mother," I said, my green eyes blazing. "Life isn't fair. But that doesn't mean I have to accept being treated like I don't matter. I deserve better than this. Better than all of you." The room fell silent, the weight of my words settling over everyone. I stood tall, my shoulders squared, and looked each of them in the eye. "You may have betrayed me," I said, "but you didn't break me. I'm stronger than you think. And I don't need you to define my worth." Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked out of the dining room, my heart pounding but my spirit unshaken. As I stepped outside, the cool evening air filled my lungs, and I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't known in months. Killian was waiting by the car, his expression a mix of pride and relief. "How did it go?" he asked, opening the door for me. I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. "I said what I needed to say," I replied. "And I don't regret a single word." As we drove away from the estate, I felt the weight of their betrayal begin to lift. Confronting them hadn't erased the pain, but it had given me the closure I needed. For the first time, I felt like I was truly moving forward. Not as the broken daughter of a fractured family, but as the strong, resilient woman I was becoming. The days following the confrontation with my family were a mix of relief and exhaustion. I had spent so long carrying the weight of their betrayal, but now that I had faced them, it felt as though a massive stone had been lifted from my shoulders. It didn't erase the pain, but it gave me something I hadn't felt in months: closure. And with that closure came an unexpected sense of clarity. I began to see my life not as something broken, but as something that had room to grow. For the first time, I could envision a future that wasn't tied to their expectations or manipulation. I didn't need their approval to move forward. I didn't need their validation to know my worth. I was free, and that freedom felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Killian, as always, was my rock. "You've been through hell and back, Emilia," he said one morning as we sat on the balcony, sipping coffee while the city slowly came to life around us. "But you didn't let it destroy you. That takes a kind of strength most people don't even realize they have." His words made me pause. Strength wasn't something I had ever associated with myself. I had always been the quiet one, the one who kept the peace, the one who put everyone else's needs above her own. But maybe Killian was right. Maybe there was strength in surviving, in choosing to move forward even when everything inside me wanted to give up. With that thought in mind, I decided it was time to start exploring who I was beyond the roles I had played for my family. For so long, I had defined myself as their dutiful daughter, the one who always sacrificed for the greater good. But now I wanted to know who I could be without those constraints. What did I want? What did I love? What kind of life did I want to create for myself? I started small, focusing on things that brought me joy. I picked up painting again, a hobby I had abandoned years ago when life became too busy. I spent hours in my tiny apartment, experimenting with colors and textures, letting the canvas become a reflection of my emotions. Some days my work was vibrant and full of life. Other days it was dark and chaotic. But no matter what I created, it felt like a piece of me finding its way back home. I also began volunteering at a local community center, helping to organize art classes for children. Seeing their excitement and creativity reminded me of the joy I had once felt when I first picked up a paintbrush. It was a reminder that art wasn't just about self-expression. It was about connection, about sharing a piece of yourself with the world. Through it all, Killian was my biggest cheerleader. He showed up to every small art show I participated in, standing proudly by my side as I displayed my work. "You have a gift, Emilia," he told me one evening as we walked home together, hand in hand. "And the world deserves to see it." His support gave me the confidence to push myself further. I started taking risks both in my art and in my life. I applied for an artist residency program I had always dreamed of but never thought I was good enough for. To my surprise, I was accepted. The program was small but prestigious, offering me the chance to work alongside other creatives and develop my skills in ways I had never imagined. The residency became a turning point for me. Surrounded by people who shared my passion, I began to see myself not just as someone who painted but as an artist. I found a sense of belonging I hadn't realized I was missing, a community that encouraged me to dream bigger and reach higher. For the first time, I felt like I was living for myself, not for anyone else. But the journey wasn't without its challenges. There were days when doubt crept in, whispering that I didn't belong, that I wasn't talented enough, that I was wasting my time. On those days, I would turn to Killian, who always seemed to know exactly what to say to pull me out of my spiral. "You've already proven you're strong, Emilia," he reminded me one evening as we sat together in my studio. "This is just another step in showing the world what you're capable of." His belief in me became the foundation I needed to keep going. And as the weeks turned into months, I began to see the fruits of my labor. My work gained recognition and I started receiving commissions from people who connected with my art. Each new opportunity felt like a victory, a reminder that I was capable of creating a life that was truly my own. Looking back, I realized that discovering my strength wasn't about erasing the pain of the past. It was about embracing it, using it as a catalyst for growth and transformation. My family's betrayal had tried to break me, but it had only revealed the resilience I hadn't known I possessed. And as I stood in my studio one evening, surrounded by the art that had become a reflection of my journey, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: pride. Life had a strange way of surprising me when I least expected it. After months of rebuilding myself and rediscovering my passions, I found that joy and love were creeping back into my life in ways I hadn't anticipated. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't just surviving, I was living. Killian had been my constant through it all, a steady presence who supported me without ever overshadowing me. But now, as I began to reclaim my happiness, I started to see him in a new light. He wasn't just the man who had stood by me during my darkest moments. He was the person who made me laugh until my stomach hurt, who celebrated my victories as if they were his own, and who made me believe that love could still be something beautiful. One evening, as we walked through the park near my apartment, the air crisp with the first hints of winter, I found myself studying him in a way I hadn't before. His auburn hair caught the fading sunlight, and his gray eyes sparkled with warmth as he recounted a funny story about a customer at his bookstore. I realized then how much I had taken him for granted, how much he had done for me without ever asking for anything in return. "Why are you looking at me like that?" he asked, a teasing smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. I shook my head, feeling a blush creep up my cheeks. "No reason," I said, though my heart was telling me otherwise. There was every reason to look at him that way. He had become my anchor, my partner, and, though I hadn't admitted it to myself yet, my future. As the weeks passed, our relationship deepened in ways that felt both thrilling and terrifying. I had been so afraid to let myself love again, scared that opening my heart would only lead to more pain. But Killian had a way of breaking down my walls, not with force but with patience. He didn't rush me or push me, he simply stood by my side, giving me the space to heal while quietly reminding me that love didn't have to be a source of pain. One day, while we were reorganizing his bookstore, something that had become a regular ritual for us, I found myself blurting out a question that had been weighing on my mind. "Why did you stay?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "After everything, after how broken I was, why didn't you leave?" Killian paused, setting down the stack of books he had been holding. He turned to me, his gray eyes searching mine. "Because I love you, Amelia," he said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. And love isn't just about being there for the good times. It's about standing by someone even when things get hard. Especially when things get hard. His words brought tears to my eyes, but this time they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude, of love, of relief that I had found someone who saw me for who I truly was and loved me anyway. "I don't know what I'd do without you," I said, my voice trembling. "You'll never have to find out," he replied, pulling me into his arms. "I'm not going anywhere." From that moment on, something shifted between us. We became more than just partners. We became a team united not just by our love but by our shared dreams and goals. We started planning for the future, talking about what we wanted our life together to look like. For the first time, I allowed myself to dream of a future that wasn't defined by my family's betrayal but by the love and joy I had found with Killian. Our happiness wasn't perfect. There were still days when the shadows of the past crept in, whispering doubts and fears. But Killian and I faced those challenges together, reminding each other that we were stronger as a team than we could ever be alone. One evening, as we sat on the couch with mugs of tea and a blanket draped over our laps, Killian turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "You know," he said, "we've been through a lot together. And I don't want to rush anything, but I think it's time we start building something bigger than just the two of us." I tilted my head, curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" He smiled, a twinkle of excitement in his eyes. "I've been thinking about starting a community project. Something that combines your love for art and my love for books. Maybe an art and literature center where people can come to learn, create, and connect." The idea filled me with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. "That sounds incredible," I said, already envisioning the possibilities. "Let's do it." And just like that, we found a new way to channel our love and energy into something meaningful. The project became a labor of love, a reflection of everything we had overcome and everything we hoped to build together. It wasn't just about creating a space for others. It was about creating a space for ourselves, a testament to the life we were building brick by brick. As we worked on the project, I realized that rediscovering joy wasn't just about the big moments. It was about the small, everyday things. The laughter we shared, the meals we cooked together, the quiet moments of connection that reminded me why I had fought so hard to heal. Killian had shown me that love didn't have to be a source of pain or fear. It could be a source of strength, of hope, of endless possibility. Looking back, I realized that my family's betrayal, as painful as it had been, had ultimately led me to this moment. Their actions had forced me to confront the parts of myself I had been too afraid to face. And in doing so, I had discovered a strength I hadn't known I possessed. That strength had allowed me to find joy again, to open my heart to love, and to create a life that was truly my own. And as Killian and I stood in our soon-to-be community center, surrounded by canvases and bookshelves waiting to be filled, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. This was my life, messy, imperfect, but undeniably beautiful. And for the first time I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. As Killian and I threw ourselves into building our community center, I began to realize just how far I'd come. What had started as a desperate attempt to heal from betrayal had grown into something so much bigger. Something meaningful not just for me but for the people around me. The center wasn't just a project. It was a symbol of the life we were creating together. A legacy built on love, resilience, and hope. The building itself was an old warehouse in the heart of the city, neglected and forgotten like so many other things in my life. But where others saw decay, Killian and I saw potential. "It's perfect," I said the first time we walked through its dusty halls. "It just needs a little love." Killian smiled, his gray eyes sparkling with excitement. "A lot of love," he teased, brushing cobwebs off an old wooden beam. "But if anyone can make this place shine, it's you." We spent months transforming this space, pouring our energy and creativity into every detail. Killian handled the logistics, negotiating with contractors, managing the budget, and coordinating with local organizations. Meanwhile, I focused on the aesthetics, designing the layout and curating the artwork that would fill the walls. Every decision, from the color of the paint to the placement of the bookshelves, felt like a piece of us coming to life. The work was exhausting but exhilarating. There were days when we argued over small details, like whether the reading nook should have beanbags or armchairs. Beanbags won, much to Killian's dismay. But even in those moments of frustration, there was an underlying sense of partnership that kept us grounded. We weren't just building a center, we were building a future. As word spread about the project, the community began to rally around us. Local artists donated their work, writers offered to lead workshops, and volunteers showed up to help with everything from painting walls to assembling furniture. Seeing their enthusiasm reminded me of why we had started this journey in the first place. This wasn't just about me or Killian. It was about creating a space where people could come together, share their stories, and find inspiration. One afternoon, as I stood in the nearly finished gallery space, admiring a mural painted by a local artist, Killian walked in with a clipboard in hand. "I think we've finally done it," he said, his voice tinged with pride. "The opening is just a week away and everything's on track." I turned to him, a smile spreading across my face. "We actually did it," I said, the reality of our accomplishment sinking in. "I can't believe it." Killian set the clipboard down and crossed the room to stand beside me. "Believe it," he said, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "This is your vision, Amelia. I just helped bring it to life." Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes as I leaned into him. "It's not just mine," I said softly. "It's ours. I couldn't have done this without you." The grand opening was a night I would never forget. The center was filled with people, friends, family, and strangers who had heard about our project and wanted to see it for themselves. The gallery walls were adorned with stunning artwork. The shelves were lined with books of every genre, and the air buzzed with excitement. As I stood on the small stage at the front of the room, preparing to give my speech, I felt a wave of nervousness wash over me. But then I looked out at the crowd and saw Killian standing near the back, his expression filled with quiet encouragement. His presence steadied me, reminding me that I wasn't alone. "Thank you all for being here tonight," I began, my voice trembling slightly. "This center is more than just a building. It's a dream that wouldn't have been possible without the support of this incredible community. It's a place where people can come together to share their stories, their art, and their passions. And for me, it's a reminder that even in our darkest moments, we can find light if we're willing to look for it." The applause that followed was overwhelming, and as I stepped off the stage, Killian was there to greet me, his arms open. "You were amazing," he said, pulling me into a hug. They loved every word. In that moment, I felt a sense of fulfillment I had never known before. The center wasn't just a success. It was a testament to everything Killian and I had built together. It was proof that even in the face of betrayal and heartbreak, there was still room for love, growth, and joy. Later that night, as we stood on the balcony of our apartment, watching the city lights twinkle below, Killian turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "You know," he said, "this is just the beginning. There's so much more we can do, so many more lives we can touch." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. He was right. This was only the start. And as I leaned into his embrace, I knew that whatever the future held, we would face it together, stronger than ever. Just as life seemed to settle into a rhythm of joy and purpose, the shadows of my past crept back into view, threatening to shake the foundation I had worked so hard to rebuild. It began with a message, one I almost ignored, but curiosity and a lingering sense of unresolved pain made me pause. The message was from Clara. Her words were carefully crafted, but I could sense the desperation beneath them. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need to talk to you. Please just give me one chance to explain. I miss you. I stared at my phone, my heart pounding. Months ago, the idea of hearing from her would have sent me into a spiral of anger and sadness. But now I felt something different. A cautious detachment, a strength that told me I could face her if I chose to. After all, I had already confronted them once. What more could she possibly say? Killian noticed the change in my demeanor as soon as he walked into the room. "What's wrong?" he asked, his gray eyes narrowing with concern. I handed him my phone, letting him read the message for himself. He frowned, his jaw tightening. "You don't owe her anything, Emilia. Not after what they did to you." "I know," I said, my voice steady. "But maybe this isn't about her. Maybe this is about me. If I can face her and walk away with my head held high, maybe it'll finally put the past to rest." Killian studied me for a moment before nodding. "If that's what you want, I'll support you. But you don't have to face her alone." The idea of Killian standing beside me gave me comfort, but I knew this was something I needed to do on my own. So, with a deep breath, I typed out a response. "Fine. Meet me at the park tomorrow at noon." Short, simple, and on my terms. The next day I arrived at the park early, the crisp autumn air biting at my cheeks. I chose a bench near the fountain, its soft bubbling providing a sense of calm. When Clara arrived, I was struck by how different she looked. She was still beautiful, with her long brown hair and hazel eyes, but there was a tiredness in her expression that hadn't been there before. She said softly as she approached, her voice hesitant. "Thank you for meeting me." I didn't respond immediately, gesturing for her to sit instead. When she did, I noticed the way her hands fidgeted in her lap, a sign of the nervousness she was trying to hide. "You said you wanted to explain," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "So, talk." She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the ground. "I don't even know where to start," she admitted. "I've spent months trying to justify what I did, but the truth is, there's no excuse. I was jealous of you. Always have been. You were everything I wanted to be, strong, talented, loved. And instead of being happy for you, I let my jealousy consume me." Her confession stung, but it wasn't entirely surprising. "Why now?" I asked. "Why reach out after all this time?" "Because I miss you," she said, her voice cracking. "I miss my sister. And I've realized how much I lost when I betrayed you. You didn't just walk away from us. You walked away from the only person who ever truly cared about me. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I needed you to know that I'm sorry." Her words hung in the air, heavy with emotion. A part of me wanted to lash out to remind her of the pain she had caused. But another part of me, a stronger, wiser part, recognized that this wasn't about her. It was about me. Forgiveness didn't mean excusing what she had done. It meant freeing myself from the hold her betrayal had on my heart. "I appreciate your apology," I said finally, my voice calm but firm. "But forgiveness isn't about words. It's about actions. If you want to rebuild any kind of relationship with me, it'll take time. And it'll have to be on my terms." Clara nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand. Thank you, Em. Thank you for even giving me this chance." As she stood to leave, I felt a sense of closure settle over me. I wasn't sure if I could ever fully trust her again, but I didn't need to. This wasn't about restoring what was lost. It was about moving forward, stronger and more self-assured than before. When I returned home, Killian was waiting for me. "How did it go?" he asked, wrapping an arm around my shoulders as I sank into the couch beside him. "It went surprisingly well," I admitted. She apologized. It felt genuine, but I told her forgiveness would take time. "I'm not ready to forget what she did, but I think I'm ready to let go of the anger." Killian smiled, pressing a kiss to my temple. "That's the Emilia I know, strong, compassionate, and wise." As I leaned into him, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Facing Clara hadn't erased the pain of the past, but it had given me the freedom to move forward without being weighed down by resentment. And as I sat there in Killian's arms, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them with the strength I had discovered within myself. After meeting with Clara, I felt a shift within me, a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. Letting go of the anger and resentment didn't mean I had forgotten what my family had done, but it meant I could finally move forward without being tethered to the pain they caused. That clarity, however, was soon tested in ways I hadn't anticipated. Not long after our conversation, rumors began to swirl in the community about my family. Victor's business dealings had taken a turn for the worse, and my father's reputation as a respected businessman was unraveling. Whispers of financial mismanagement and broken deals reached my ears, and although I had distanced myself from them, the fallout was impossible to ignore. The family that once thrived on manipulation and control was now on the brink of collapse. One morning, as I was sketching in the sunlight of our studio at the community center, my phone buzzed incessantly. I picked it up to find missed calls from Clara and even Victor, calls I hadn't received in months. Hesitating for a moment, I finally answered, curiosity and trepidation mixing in equal measure. "Amelia," Victor said when I picked up, his tone lacking its usual confidence. "We need your help." It was the last thing I expected to hear. "By help?" I repeated, unable to keep the surprise from my voice. "After everything you've done, you have the audacity to ask for my help?" He sighed, a sound that was almost vulnerable. "I know we've made mistakes, terrible ones, but everything's falling apart. If we don't find a way to fix this, we'll lose everything." I wanted to hang up. My first instinct was to let them face the consequences of their actions, but something in Victor's voice gave me pause. For the first time I heard desperation. Genuine desperation. "I'll think about it," I said curtly, ending the call before he could respond. When I told Killian what had happened, his reaction was immediate. "You don't owe them anything, Amelia," he said firmly. "They made their choices and now they have to live with the consequences." "I know," I replied, pacing the room. "But if I don't at least hear them out, will I regret it? I've worked so hard to move on, but what if ignoring them keeps me tied to the past?" Killian studied me for a moment before nodding. "If this is something you need to do, I'll support you. But promise me you won't let them take advantage of you again." The next day I agreed to meet Victor at a neutral location, a quiet cafe in the city. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting with a cup of untouched coffee and a stack of papers in front of him. His usual composed demeanor was gone, replaced by a man who looked older, wearier, and far less certain of himself. "Thank you for coming," he said, standing awkwardly as I approached. "Don't thank me yet," I replied, taking a seat. "Let's hear it. What's going on?" Victor explained the situation. A series of bad investments, mounting debts, and the unraveling of my father's once stable empire. Clara had been dragged into the chaos, her own small ventures now in jeopardy as a result of their poor decisions. "We've tried everything," Victor admitted, his voice strained. "But we're out of options. The connections you've built through the community center. They could help us." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "And why should I help you? After everything you did to me, after everything you took from me, why should I lift a finger to save you?" His shoulders sagged, and for a moment he looked like the brother I had once trusted. "Because you're better than us," he said quietly. "Because you have the strength and compassion we never had." His words struck a chord, but I refused to let my emotions cloud my judgment. "This isn't about saving you," I said firmly. "If I decide to help, it'll be for the sake of the people who could be hurt by your mistakes. Not for you." Victor nodded, his expression filled with gratitude. "That's more than I deserve. Thank you, Amelia." In the days that followed, I found myself navigating a delicate balance. Through my connections, I helped Victor and Clara find resources to stabilize their situation, but I made it clear that my involvement came with boundaries. I refused to take on their burden as my own, ensuring they understood that this was their mess to clean up. The experience was exhausting but eye-opening. It reminded me of how far I had come and how much stronger I had become. I wasn't the same woman they had betrayed. I was someone who could face adversity with grace, someone who could choose compassion without sacrificing her own well-being. When the dust finally settled, Clara sent me a letter, handwritten, not a text or email. In it, she expressed a level of sincerity I hadn't seen from her in years. "You didn't have to help us," she wrote. "But you did, and I'll never forget it. You've shown me what real strength looks like, and I can only hope to learn from your example." Reading her words, I felt a mix of emotions: relief, closure, and most surprisingly, hope. Maybe the wounds of the past would never fully heal, but they no longer defined me. I had risen above the chaos, not because I needed to prove anything to them, but because I had found peace within myself. Killian's arms wrapped around me as I finished reading, his warmth grounding me in the present. "You've done more than anyone could have expected," he said softly. "You've turned your pain into something beautiful." I smiled, leaning into him. "I think I'm finally ready to leave it all behind," I said. And as I looked out at the vibrant city beyond our window, I knew it was true. Life had settled into a fragile rhythm after my brief involvement in helping my family. I thought I could finally move on, leaving their chaos behind. But the past has a way of demanding resolution, and mine came knocking in the form of an unexpected visit from my father. It was a quiet evening. Killian and I had just finished dinner, and we were lounging on the couch, surrounded by sketches for the community center's upcoming expansion. The knock on the door startled us both. Killian glanced at me, his brows furrowed. "Were you expecting someone?" I shook my head and stood to answer the door. When I opened it, there he was, my father, looking older and more worn than I remembered. His once imposing presence had diminished, replaced by a man who seemed uncertain of his place in the world. "Amelia," he said, his voice low. "May I come in?" I hesitated, my hand tightening on the doorknob. Memories of his betrayal flooded my mind, but there was something in his eyes, a quiet desperation, that made me step aside. "5 minutes," I said, my tone firm. "That's all you get." Killian stayed nearby, his presence a silent reassurance as my father and I sat at the dining table. For a moment my father said nothing, his gaze fixed on his hands. Then he spoke. "I know I'm the last person you want to see. And I know I've failed you as a father in ways I can't begin to make up for." I folded my arms, keeping my expression neutral. "Why are you here?" He sighed, his shoulders slumping. "Because I've lost everything, Amelia. The business, the estate, it's all gone. And as much as it shames me to admit it, I've come to realize that I pushed away the one person who might have helped me keep it all together." His words stirred something deep within me, anger, sadness, and a flicker of the love I once had for him. "You didn't just push me away," I said, my voice trembling. "You betrayed me. You chose greed and manipulation over your own daughter." "I know," he said, his voice breaking. "And I will regret it for the rest of my life. I let Victor and Clara convince me that taking from you was the only way to secure the family's future. But they were wrong. I was wrong." Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "You didn't just take from me, Father. You broke something that can't be easily fixed. And now, after all this time, you expect me to forgive you because you've lost everything?" He shook his head. "I don't expect forgiveness, Amelia. I needed you to know that I see now what I didn't see then. You were the best of us, and I let my pride blind me to that. I'm sorry." His apology hung in the air, heavy with years of unspoken pain. Part of me wanted to lash out to make him feel the depth of my hurt. But another part of me, the part that had grown stronger through this journey, recognized that holding on to anger wouldn't serve me anymore. "I appreciate your apology," I said finally, my voice steady. "But forgiveness isn't about erasing the past. It's about choosing to move forward. And while I may find a way to forgive you someday, that doesn't mean things will ever go back to the way they were." He nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I understand. And I'll accept whatever you're willing to give." When he left, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, sadness, and a sense of finality. It was as if a chapter of my life had finally come to a close, not with dramatic fireworks but with quiet resolution. Later that night, Killian found me sitting on the balcony, staring at the stars. "How are you feeling?" he asked, sitting beside me and wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "Lighter," I said, leaning into him. "I didn't think I'd ever get the closure I needed, but I think I have now. It's not perfect and it never will be, but it's enough." He kissed the top of my head, his warmth grounding me. "You've come so far, Amelia. I'm so proud of you." As I gazed at the night sky, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. My family's betrayal had once defined me, but now it was just a part of my story. A story of resilience, growth, and the strength it took to rise above. And with Killian by my side, I knew that whatever came next, I was ready to face it. The weeks after my father's visit felt like the final pages of a chapter one had been writing for far too long. For the first time, I felt untethered from the pain of my family's betrayal. The scars were still there, of course, but they no longer defined me. I was ready to embrace the life I had built. A life filled with love, purpose, and a future that was entirely mine. At the community center, our hard work was beginning to pay off. The gallery walls were alive with vibrant artwork. The library was a haven for readers of all ages, and our workshops were thriving. Seeing the joy on the faces of the people who walked through our doors reminded me why I had fought so hard to create this space. It wasn't just a building. It was a symbol of hope and resilience, a place where others could find the strength to rise above their own struggles. One evening, as I was locking up the center, Killian appeared with a mischievous smile. "Come with me," he said, taking my hand and leading me outside. "Where are we going?" I asked, laughing as he pulled me toward the park across the street. "You'll see," he replied, his gray eyes twinkling with excitement. When we reached the park, I noticed a small group of people gathered around a makeshift stage. Fairy lights hung from the trees, casting a soft glow over the scene, and the sound of a violin filled the air. It was a surprise celebration organized by Killian and the community to honor the success of the center. As I stood there, surrounded by friends and strangers alike, tears welled in my eyes. This wasn't just about the center. It was about the journey that had brought me here. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the moments when I thought I couldn't go on, they had all led to this. And in that moment I realized that I wouldn't trade any of it. Every challenge, every struggle had shaped me into the person I was today. Killian took my hand and led me onto the stage. "This is your moment, Emilia," he whispered. "You've earned it." As I stood in front of the crowd, I felt a surge of emotion. "Thank you," I began, my voice trembling. "Thank you for believing in this dream and for making it a reality. The center is more than just a building. It's a testament to what we can achieve when we come together, when we refuse to let our struggles define us." The applause that followed was overwhelming, and as I stepped off the stage, Killian pulled me into his arms. "You're incredible," he said softly. "You've turned pain into something beautiful." And I couldn't be prouder. Later that night, as we sat on the balcony of our apartment, watching the city lights twinkle below, I reflected on how far I had come. My family's betrayal had once felt like the end of everything, but it had been the beginning of a journey I never could have imagined. I had found strength in myself, love in Killian, and purpose in the community we had built together. "I never thought I'd get here," I admitted, resting my head on Killian's shoulder. He smiled, his fingers gently brushing through my hair. "You were always meant to get here, Emilia. You just needed to believe in yourself." As I gazed out at the city, I felt a sense of peace and fulfillment I hadn't known in years. This was my life. Messy, imperfect, but undeniably beautiful. And for the first time I felt ready to embrace every moment of it. The day I closed the door on my past, I opened the door to an entirely new chapter of my life. It wasn't just about leaving the pain behind. It was about stepping fully into the person I had become, someone stronger, wiser, and more alive than I ever thought possible. It began with a simple decision. Killian and I were sitting at the kitchen table one sunny morning, sipping coffee and reviewing plans for the next phase of the community center. The center had become a thriving hub of creativity and connection, and our plans to expand its reach filled me with excitement. But there was something else on my mind, something I had been quietly contemplating for weeks. "I've been thinking," I said, setting down my mug and meeting Killian's curious gaze. "What if we took a break? Just for a little while? We've poured so much of ourselves into the center, but maybe it's time to focus on us, on what's next for our lives." Killian tilted his head, a soft smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "What do you have in mind?" "Travel," I said, the words spilling out with a mix of excitement and nervousness. "There's so much of the world I want to see, so much inspiration out there waiting for us. I think it's time we explore it, together." His smile widened and he reached across the table to take my hand. "I think that sounds perfect." And just like that, a new adventure began. Over the following weeks, we planned our journey, mapping out a route that would take us to places we had only dreamed of. From the bustling streets of Paris to the tranquil beaches of Bali, each destination became a promise of new experiences, new memories, and a deeper connection between us. The day we boarded our first flight, I felt a sense of exhilaration I hadn't known since I was a child. Killian and I held hands as the plane took off, the world below shrinking into a patchwork of colors. It was a moment of pure possibility, a reminder that life was meant to be lived fully, without fear or hesitation. Our travels were everything I had hoped for and more. We wandered through art galleries and ancient ruins, shared meals with strangers who became friends, and found inspiration in the beauty of the world around us. I sketched every chance I got, my notebook filling with images and ideas that felt like they had been waiting for this journey to emerge. But the most meaningful part of our travels wasn't the places we visited, it was the time we spent together. Away from the responsibilities of the center and the shadows of my past, Killian and I grew closer than ever. We laughed, we dreamed, and we built a foundation for the life we wanted to create together. One evening, as we watched the sun set over the Amalfi Coast, Killian turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Emilia," he said, his voice soft but steady, "I've loved you from the moment I met you. And every day since then, you've shown me just how incredible you are. Your strength, your compassion, your ability to rise above everything life throws at you. I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me?" Tears filled my eyes as I looked at him, the man who had stood by me through every storm and celebrated every victory. "Yes," I whispered, my voice trembling with emotion. 1,000 times yes. The days that followed were a blur of happiness and celebration. Our engagement felt like the culmination of everything we had been through. The heartbreak, the growth, the love we had built together. It wasn't just a promise for the future. It was a testament to the journey that had brought us here. When we returned home, we found the community center thriving in our absence, thanks to the incredible team we had built. Our lives settled into a new rhythm, one filled with purpose, joy, and anticipation for the future. Planning our wedding became another adventure, one that brought us even closer as we crafted a day that reflected everything we valued: love, resilience, and the beauty of connection. On our wedding day, as I stood at the end of the aisle, looking at Killian waiting for me with tears in his eyes, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The path that had brought me here had been anything but easy, but it had been worth it. Every challenge, every betrayal, every moment of doubt had led me to this moment, to this man, and to the life we were about to build together. As we exchanged vows, I spoke from my heart. "You've shown me what love truly is, not just in the good times but in the hardest moments when it felt like the world was falling apart. You've been my anchor, my partner, and my greatest joy. I promise to stand by you, to cherish you, and to build a life with you that's filled with love and laughter." Killian's vows were just as heartfelt, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "You've taught me what strength looks like, Emilia. You've faced so much and yet you've never lost your light. I promise to honor you, to support you, and to love you with everything I have for all the days of my life." As we shared our first kiss as husband and wife, the world around us seemed to fade away. In that moment there was only us. Two people who had weathered the storms of life and come out stronger, ready to embrace whatever the future held. Looking back, I realized that my family's betrayal, as painful as it had been the catalyst for everything that followed. It had forced me to confront my fears, to find my strength, and to discover a love that was greater than anything I had ever known. And as Killian and I danced under the stars that night, surrounded by the people who had become our true family, I knew that this was just the beginning of a life filled with endless possibilities.